Hey everybody, this is a completely impromptu live, sort of. I woke up this morning deciding that I wanted to do a podcast episode today, and as I mentioned, it's probably been quite a while now, I'm going to start recording these live in the Healing Hearts group. So if you're joining me from Healing Hearts, hello, and to everyone else, welcome to the Healing Hearts and Awakening Souls podcast. Let's see. You're welcome to comment and say hello. I just might not be able to respond right back as it's a podcast episode and I won't be pulling cards today. But I did want to talk about the darker side of the healing journey. And it's something that I've been going through myself pretty intimately and deeply, I'd say for over a month now. It's part of the reason that I haven't really been showing up in the spaces. So let me just... Okay. I just hope I'm in the right group. I always get nervous that I'm in the wrong group, but I'm pretty sure I'm in the right group. All right. So, welcome to the Healing Hearts and Awakening Souls podcast. It's been a while since I've done an episode. I personally have been through a pretty deep healing, purging phase, and that's what I wanted to talk about. It's been really hard to get back into showing up in social media because I didn't really want to. I've been going through a cocooning phase, just kind of wanting to hide out. So I want to start this episode by talking a little bit about the different, not all the different phases that we go through, but just this idea that, you know, we talk about big energies when they come in. So I know the eclipse was a big energy for me. The first one happened on my birthday, so I knew it was going to be pretty significant. And I had some expectations around what that was going to look like. And they were pretty powerful, high, positive expectations. Along with that came, you know, some readings that I had done either end of last year or earlier this year. And everything was really positive and like you're going to be stepping into your own, you're going to be embodying, you know, everything that you've been working for, these really beautiful messages. And while I would say, at least at this point, and it's a little short-sighted, right, because it's only been a month, but at least at this point, it doesn't feel, it feels the way it was described a little bit, but not the way that I expected it to feel. I didn't expect there to be this very deep and intense, and I would say more intense than anything I think I have experienced up until this point, other than possibly the depression that I experienced as a teenager. But it has been some of the most intense and painful healing work that I've done, despite the fact that there's very little in my external reality happening. And this is one of the things I want to talk about today is when we're doing this healing work and when we're going through these things, those of us that are drawn to this kind of work, we're just kind of stuck doing it. Like there's just this internal drive to do it. We've been brought to it at some point in our lives. You know, our guides directed us here, or the universe directed us here, or just our human journeys directed us here, where we got to a place maybe where life was too painful, and so we had to go inward. We had nowhere else to go. There's a lot of different ways that it could have played out, where you ended up on this spiritual journey and this healing and awakening journey. For me, it's always both. It's not one or the other. It's always both. The way that we awaken to the more that we are, happens because of the deeper healing work that we do, so that we can release those lower vibrations and we can step more fully into the higher consciousness aspect of us, not because that's the right thing to do, but simply because that's where we are at in the human journey at this time. So I've been guided to do that. Now I say that, and yet there's probably a million different timelines playing out and a million different soul purposes and soul journeys and missions going on. So mine is not the only one. It's not the right one. You know, I think sometimes we get in these spiritual communities and a lot of people see things the way that they see them, which is beautiful, and having that self-awareness is beautiful. But when we start to say like, well, my experience should be everybody else's experiences, we get into trouble, right? So just because I'm drawn to this work and it feels so beautiful and right for me, it feels like the thing I need to be doing, doesn't mean that other people need to be doing it. And so that's something that a lot of us face, that feel like we may be the light workers, way showers, starseeds, and that we're so drawn to do this deeper healing work, is that other people in our lives may not be and may not understand it. And so there's times where, you know, I've been very cognizant of how I'm showing up publicly. So like social media mostly, that's pretty much the most public space that I show up in. And my beautiful mother, I don't think she's in this group, but she's on my business page. And so sometimes when I write things like, oh, the darkness that I moved through over the weekend, and I wonder what she's thinking, because she's probably like, well, Kara, I just saw you on Saturday at Ethan's soccer game and you seemed fine, because anyone in my actual physical life, if they ask me how I'm doing, I'm going to say, oh, I'm doing pretty good. And I'm, for the most part, going to mean it. Like, it's true. For the most part, I'm doing pretty good. But there can always be this side of me that is in a deep healing phase. There's times when I can do both and really be okay. And then there's times like this past, it's been a little bit over a month, I would say, since my birth, since that first eclipse, something just shifted like overnight for me. It really threw me and I wasn't expecting it. But that was a time where, if somebody asked me how I was doing, I might be like, well, it's been rough, it's been a struggle, but I'd find some sort of third dimensional thing to blame it on so that it made sense to most people. Then I have the people in my life, like, you amazing people, my soul sisters, those that are in the Cosmic Souls community, which is, I mean, I've posted a little bit about it, but I haven't really talked much about, this gigantic transformation that my business has taken, which I think has been a huge piece of this really deep purging healing phase that I've been going through, because it's been such a huge transformational shift for me to take my business that I created by myself. It's just been me, myself, and I on this journey for about 6 years of being this solopreneur, so to speak. And I have merged, my it's not all of my work. I still do independent work, but the biggest piece for me was my soul healing circle, and I have merged that with 3 other healers into this Cosmic Souls community. So, but it's such a beautiful, it's the same as my soul healing community, just more. And so I'm so grateful to have that space where I get to say things like, oh my God, I am really going through it. And they're not going to expect that something catastrophic is happening in my actual life, because they understand that sometimes when we're doing this healing work, it is just heavy and painful and challenging and difficult. And it's so easy to judge ourselves and be like, what is wrong with me? Why am I so miserable, right? Because I could look at my life and be like, why am I so miserable? And I really have been like in a very heavy, heavy space. My higher self keeps telling me that it's just a very deep purging phase, and I have to go through it because I'm clearing out, lower vibrational densities. And it's a lot of ego death. It's a lot of, and ego death, I feel like, is almost one of the most painful healing processes for us to go through, because our egos are trying so desperately to keep us safe, and they're trying to keep these constructs intact of what we have believed is true about ourselves and the world and others. Even if those beliefs are somewhat negative or painful or limiting, it truly believes that it has to hang on to those constructs in order to keep us safe so that we cannot get hurt. And so, this merging of my business with these other soul sisters of mine have brought up not only things around, worthiness and not being enough, and success, and what does success look like, and what I've ultimately created up until this point, what I'm releasing, what I'm letting go of. In a sense, it felt like I was giving up on something. And, my ego just really was like, whoa, what are we doing? What are we doing? We've built this thing, and we're just gonna let it shift into something completely different, even though, and this is what helped me through it. I knew from the beginning of this year that was going to happen. I told the community, I know I've said this probably in here and other places, I knew that the community was going to shift into something and expand into something else. So that did help me to keep taking the steps forward, because I knew it. I had seen it coming. I had envisioned it. But what it also brought up for me was some really painful sisterhood wounds, because I'm ultimately trusting these other women, with my baby, with, something that is as important to me at this point as my children, and that is my service work, and how I do that, and how I interact with others as I'm doing it. So all of these shifts, and I also feel like what I am creating with my work is like I'm in the baby stages of it, and I can feel how expansive it's going to be. So I also feel like on an unconscious or subconscious, like soul level, a part of me recognizes that by taking these steps, I'm really committing myself to stepping into something huge. And I think a part of me is just like, well, I don't know. I don't know about that. I don't know if I'm ready for that. I don't know if I'm good enough for that, right? Of course, it always goes back to I'm not good enough. But also the sisterhood wound thing really came up powerfully for me. I've had a lot of really painful experiences in my past. I think most of us have, because we just generally don't know how to truly be there for each other and hold space for one another. As a society, as a people, as a sisterhood or brotherhood, so a lot of us probably have wounding around that, especially just from our younger years, because kids can be mean and they don't necessarily intend to be as mean as they are or really understand the ramifications of our actions, right? And so that came up really strongly for me. And it was just this tsunami of things coming up in these waves. And there were moments where I voiced, and this was really important and powerful, where I voiced what I was experiencing. Again, I'm going back to, I'm so grateful that I have safe spaces that I can do that. That is what that Cosmic Souls community that we have created is for, and is providing a space for, but I also have my sisters that I created this space with, that I feel comfortable, even though my ego was afraid that they were the ones that would hurt me. But I was able to voice it. And there is something incredibly powerful about taking something that we're experiencing, especially when we're going through this healing process and it feels so heavy and so dark and so lonely. There's something incredibly powerfully transformative of when we can express that and be vulnerable. And that's essentially what I'm doing today, because there's no part of me that wants to be public yet. Like, I still want to hide. I still want to be in my cocoon, but I just kept feeling like people need to hear this. People need to know that it's okay, first of all, to feel this way when we're on the healing and awakening journey, because there's so much about the love and the light, which is beautiful, but the gratitude, the love and the light, shift your mindset, think a different thought, all of these different things. And what I realized in this phase of my healing journey where I've been at for the last several weeks is that I couldn't do that. And I often talk about, the line. There's a very thin line between when we can choose to show up differently because we've already healed something and it's just the remnants of that. And we are able to, we've worked through enough of that healing process that we're really able to just break out of the mold and choose something different, and we can feel better. There are times when we have that ability. This wasn't one of those times. This isn't one of those times, I need to say, because I'm not out of it. This is one of those times where I had to acknowledge that what was coming up was bigger than me, that needed to be felt, and was demanding my attention, and was not going to allow me to just ignore it or move on or shift out of it like that. I needed to sink into it, and I needed to be with it. And it's just important that we know that it's okay to take that time when we need to take that time. It's okay to go into the darkness, to be in the low vibrations. There is nothing wrong with that, and it doesn't make you weak or wrong or anything. That's surrender. That's the surrender. And we get so scared. I know I do, especially with a history of depression, because I felt depressed this last month. I have felt depressed in a way that I haven't, again, since I was a teenager. And there's a part of me that is afraid that if I fully allow myself to surrender to those emotions that are trying to come through, that I won't be able to come back, that I will give up, I will let go, I will be forever lost in the abyss of the darkness. But that was something that I actually was able to realize through this process of allowing myself to surrender and feel these things. It feels so good to feel it sometimes. And I think it's just because of who I am and what I came here to help clear. And there's been a lot of sadness. I've been just crying for no reason. Just like, I can't even express to you like the depth of this emotion that has been coming through me. But yet every time I do, if I'm honest with myself and if I get out of my head and I get out of the programming it actually feels really good. It feels so good to allow myself to be there. It feels so good to express it. Because when I was a teenager and I had depression, and it's interesting too, because I've been kind of revamping the way that I see depression itself. Like, I've always felt like I was depressed partly because of my starseed lightworker nature, but not understanding it then. And that I realize now, like, what if depression is more of like the people that were meant to process deep sadness or deep grief or whatever it is that's beneath their depression. And the depression is really just created when we fight it, when we think there's something wrong with that, when we label it as a bad thing. Now, understanding that it can be very painful, but I think the pain comes from the confusion and it comes from the separation that we're feeling. So yes, as I've allowed myself to sink into the darkness, again, there's a part of me that is afraid that if I let myself go so deep, it's kind of like if you've ever seen the movie What Dreams May Come. At the end of the movie, the wife she lost her children were in a car accident and she died. And then I think she killed herself, and it's like it takes place in like the afterlife, and she's like sitting in this creation of her own mental process, this own hell that she's created in her own mind, and her husband is trying to get her out of there, and he realizes that the only way that he can help her is to surrender to the mental construct and to just be with her. And the moment that he does that and surrenders into simply being there, she snaps out of it. And so it's almost, I get that sense of like, this fear of like, if I let go and go into the darkness, I am going to forget that I am so much more and that I actually have a connection to source, and that, all of these things that I teach are true, because when I'm in this darkness, I also start to doubt everything that I teach. And it's like, really? Really? Can I really create my own reality? It doesn't seem like anything's changing. I feel like crap, whatever it is. And I go down the rabbit hole. And I have that fear that I'm never going to be able to get out. But I feel like it's what I came here to do. I came here to feel those things strongly and to feel them deeply. And I do believe that on the other side of this process is going to be something beautiful, but I'm still in the process. And so I just wanted to shed a little bit of light on that for people, shed light on the fact that it's okay to be in the dark, right? And it's okay to voice it to people and to let people know, because I have a very personal, specific fear of sharing my feelings with people and being rejected for it, because that's happened to me several times in my life growing up. And it has probably happened to many of you in one way or another. It's hard for people that are unwilling to connect with their deeper, darker, denser emotions, right? And many people choose not to because we're programmed not to, or programmed to ignore, to deny, don't cry, emotions make you weak. We're programmed in so many ways not to deal with our own. And so we certainly don't know how to deal with other people's. And so very often when people start to show a lot of emotion, and in fact, I even get this way, when people start to get emotional in like TV or movies, I get uncomfortable. So it's interesting I say this, and then to go through this very deep healing purging phase, and that's what's coming up, is very deep painful emotions that need to be felt and need to be processed. And so going back to what I was trying to say in the very beginning of, where everyone is at in their process, I feel like I do know many people that are drawn to this kind of work that are going through this exact thing right now. And I also know a handful that are not, and they're doing really, really well. So there's another piece of judgment. We can often judge how we're doing compared to how other people are doing. I know for myself, it's like, oh, everybody's going through some deep healing phase. Why do I feel great then? There's something wrong with me. No, right? We all just have our process. We all have our own divine timing for when things are supposed to unfold, for when we're going through the ups and the downs. And for me, for whatever reason, even though I thought the eclipse on my birthday was going to be this magnificent high, it ended up going in the other direction. It ended up being a very deep journey into the depths of the darker aspects of my shadow self. And something else came through while I was really paying attention to this. And it's that I feel like part of what the healing work I'm doing right now, and that many of us may do at some point or another when it is our divine time to do, is like, I felt like I was, going back to like the sisterhood wounds, or, the ego deaths that I am experiencing, that can be so incredibly painful at times. And we don't even necessarily cognitively understand why they're so painful. They just are. We can feel it. It's felt like areas where I've done a lot of work. I've already done a lot of work. And maybe I've even cleared like the bigger aspect of it, like the mass of it. But these things are like these little remnants, these little like glass shards that are just still stuck deep in my tissue, deep in my cellular structure and DNA. And so they're small, but the extraction of them is so incredibly painful. But they need to be taken out. They need to also be healed, even though the mass of the thing is healed. And so from that bigger perspective, I can say like, oh my gosh, Kara, of course your sisters love you. Of course you have friends. Of course you're doing a great job in your work, or whatever it is. Of course you're enough. I can say that, and most of me can believe that. But there's just still these little remnants. And I feel like, this is what some of these deep healing phases are for, is so that we can go really, really, really deep and we can pull out some of those shards. Because as long as those shards are still in there, then there's still an aspect of us that is vibrating with the frequency of the pain or the trauma or the experience or whatever it is, the wounds. So I say that so that when we revisit these things, we don't think, oh my God, has all of my work been for nothing? Because that's not the case. That's not true. You have probably cleared a massive part of it. But there are just these little shards, and there's, it's almost like the process of us moving through it and then to the other side. Remember, I said that it was really important that I shared. I feel like even doing this podcast episode on this is going to help my healing process by sharing it, by putting it out there. A lot of our shards have shame attached to them, and shame thrives in the dark. It thrives in secrecy, right? As long as we don't acknowledge it, as long as we don't talk about it, we can kind of pretend it's not there, but it still hurts. We still feel the pain of it from time to time. So by sharing it with others, by coming together in communities or sisterhoods or circles or what have you. And that's what I notice a lot of light workers and healers and starseeds and, all of us on this journey doing this work, we're all kind of being drawn to that right now. I've seen a lot of just incredible healers out there creating more communities, coming together more, bringing their services together more. And that is really what it is about right now. It's about the ability to hold space for our processes. And many of us know how to do the process. We know the tools, we know how to do it, we know what it's all about, but there's just something incredibly powerfully healing about when we go through our process, and yet we also can share it. We can be vulnerable, we can show up in spaces and allow others the permission to show up messy, to be in pain, to be depressed, to be sad, to cry, to show emotion, to be angry, to be upset, to be, maybe not your best self, to show the side of you that is, a little bit raw and messy, right? And that is what I did with my sisters, and I've been doing that with my family a lot too, which is not not the best, because they don't know how to hold the space for that. Although my son did bring me a flower yesterday, which was really cute. I was having a really, really rough day with the kids, and he took it upon himself to go out in the pouring rain and pick a flower for me, because he could just tell that I was just really struggling. And so God bless him. Yeah. God knew it. God, I always say he's the one, he's my fourth, he's my youngest. And I always said he's the one that I never knew I needed. But anyways. All right. By the way, if you guys are commenting, I'm not seeing any comments, which is totally fine because it's a podcast episode anyways, but I hope that this is resonating. I hope that this is bringing some peace to anyone that is really struggling on their journey right now. Because as I said, I do know a lot of people that are. And I feel like it's probably the eclipse has really activated some things for people depending on your natal chart, right? And what's been activated in your natal chart. But there are many people who are going through some very deep healing purging phases as well. And so, again, I feel like we need to talk about it. I feel like we need to express it, right? Take away that secrecy, put it into the light. And it's okay to, because I went through this so deeply of like almost being triggered by any of the normal language. Even watching my own videos or watching other teachers, I don't watch a ton of other teachers anymore, but there's a couple that I will still listen to. And when they would say the things that I always say, like, the higher perspective, you gotta, probably things that I even have said in this recording today, like from the higher perspective, all those things that we know from the higher perspective, the soul truths. It was like there was this phase where I was like, I don't even want to hear it. I couldn't even stand to hear. It was like my head was like, I can't even stand to hear the BS coming out of my own mouth. Like that was the phase of just darkness and doubt I was in. But what that truly is, it's a fear of our ego of letting go of the old constructs and the old programming, first of all. But it's also simply a result of how deep we're allowing ourselves to go into our own darkness, into our own shadow. Because the more that we go into the human programming, the darkness, the shadows, the farther we are from source, and the more we feel that disconnection that is the human experience. And so we're going to have those experiences of like doubting everything, doubting all of it, doubting our power, doubting our light, doubting this process, doubting the journey. And that's painful too, because essentially what we're doing is we are denying our own truth. And that's really painful. And so we will feel that pain, but we won't necessarily make that connection that that's why it feels so painful. We'll just be aware of how painful it feels. So again, it's okay to go there. It's okay to feel it. It's okay to connect with it and to, I always teach the 0 point. You come in, you connect to it, you breathe it through. I haven't even been able to clear energy for a few days, I noticed, until last night. And then I just was laying down, and all of a sudden I was able to clear energy again for the first time. And I don't really know, it hasn't been the whole month that I haven't been clearing energy, but I didn't realize it until last night that I haven't been doing it for at least a couple days, maybe a week. I don't know. Probably not that long. Because I had a really incredible healing experience. I think it was last week with one of my friends, but maybe after that, I wasn't really clearing energy for a little while. And then all of a sudden last night, I had a huge clearing, and it was like, oh my God, I felt like I could breathe again for the first time. So there's big things happening. There's big things going on energetically. And it's okay wherever you're at on your journey. It's okay if you're not feeling this at all. But someday you might, and then you can come back and watch this and say, okay, how do I get through this? Because I do believe that showing up in our vulnerability, and I don't think that the healing community talks about the dark side of the healing work as much. And it's because it sucks, especially as a teacher. It's like, I don't want to talk about the part that sucks. I don't want to talk about the painful part. And I don't want to talk about the part where I doubt everything that I teach, because that doesn't sound good. That's not going to make people want to do this healing and awakening work. But the truth is that I don't convince anyone to do it ever. I mean, people find me when they're ready to find me. People find me when they're ready to do the healing work, and it's something that intrinsically turns on inside of you that says, okay, we're doing this. And usually we can't ignore it, or we can, but it'll be painful. So there's that. Let me see if there is anything else I wanted to share. I think that's it. On one hand, like there's just so much flooding in, but on the other hand, it's like, I think I said what I needed to say today. And then, there'll be more to come. So that's where I've been. I have been cocooning for a while, and I don't feel like I'm quite done cocooning, but I do feel like it's time to start emerging and sharing, because others might be going through it as well. And so if you are, if you are feeling any of the things that I've talked about, then you would understand why it would be so important to have community. And so I'll just end with letting everyone know that the soul healing, no, it's not the soul healing circle anymore. The Cosmic Souls community is my new soul healing circle, and I am doing it with 3 other incredible healers. We all have different gifts. We all have different things that we bring to the table. But just in the week that we've been doing it, just incredible shares, incredible vulnerability. I feel like we're just coming in strong, and I feel like part of that is because the Soul Healing Circle pretty much transitioned in, and these women know how to show up. So if you feel like you need a community space to help you through this healing and awakening process, just a place to go to be you, to be vulnerable, to share, and also learn about really cool stuff, because we all teach classes, then check out the Soul Healing community. I will link it in the notes, and I'll link it in the group. And I think that that's everything. If you guys were commenting while I was doing the podcast episode, I'm not seeing any comments, so I will go back and double check that. But thank you so much for joining me today, and until next time, take care.